Hi, I'm Sherry Street, and I'm going to talk to you tonight about compost. When I was a little girl, I used to go to stay with my grandmother sometime for weeks in the summer, and she lived in Fort Worth, and her next door neighbor's house was, not far away. She lived on a block with lots of houses, and her next door neighbor, Yvonne, every summer would put something on her yard, and her yard would smell so bad. I would wrinkle my nose up and it would waft over into my grandmother's yard, and my grandmother would say, Yvonne has bought that stinky compost and put it on her grass again. And that was the first I'd ever heard of compost. So I grew up thinking compost was stinky, horrible stuff. Well, now I love gardening. It's one of my passions. I'm a master naturalist, a master composter, a master gardener, and the director of Keep Waco Beautiful. So I use compost in all of those fields. What compost is decaying organic matter. And compost doesn't really smell. Why we use it is it's nature's fertilizer. It is so good for the grass, for the garden, for the vegetables, the flowers, everything. It aerates the soil, which is necessary for the roots to really grow and be strong, and it helps retain water. When it rains onto the grass, the compost, or the garden, or wherever you've composted, the compost is beneath that, and it acts like a sponge. The rain goes down into it and it holds it there, which means less watering for you. So that's a money saver. But also, particularly in hot climates, it's essential. Like in Texas, it's essential that water's held under there and that the roots can feed off that water because it gets so hot here. Another good thing about compost, the third thing, and the thing that to me is the most important, is that it leaches minerals. Because it is a decaying organic matter, and it's not all the way decayed, it's leaching minerals and nutrients as it continues to decay into the soil. So that's how it's nature's fertilizer. There's two ways you can get it. You can buy it, like Yvonne, supposedly, or you can make it. It's not hard to make. I prefer to make it. I like the satisfaction of making it. I like to know what's in it. And if I've made it, I certainly know what's in it. And I like the recycling element of it. I like to know that I'm not helping fill the landfill with my leftovers from the yard trimmings and the grass and the branches, as well as the scraps from my kitchen. I'm recycling them, and they're going back into the soil. I compost in two ways. You can compost one way. You can buy your compost. Whatever. Please get compost. It is so good for your soil. The two ways that I'm the most familiar with are vermicomposting and regular bin composting. Vermicomposting is worm composting. It's using worms to create this wonderful fertilizer. It's easy to do. You need a bin, a tote. It can be the size of a shoebox, or it can be just one of those great big Rubbermaid totes. You need to poke holes into it. The holes need to be big enough so that enough air is going in there. You just do, 20 holes around, and on the top, make sure it has a top on it. Enough for the air to go in, but you don't want them too big because the worms can come out. So, and then you need some shredded newspaper. You shred the newspaper, put it into the tote, spray the tote with water lightly with a little, sprayer, and then you put in the red wiggler worms. Mary Appeloff has written the Bible for vermicomposting, and it's called Worms Eat My Garbage. And she says that red wigglers are the best choice of worms because the worms in your garden, they aren't domestic. They don't live in captivity very well, but red wigglers just explode in captivity. They just multiply. They eat their body's weight, according to Mary Appleoff. They eat their body's weight in decaying matter every day. So if you have a big bunch of worms, they're eating a lot. They also have lots of babies, is my experience. So with vermicomposting, you just throw your scraps from the kitchen into the bin. Scraps include vegetables, and these are uncooked, vegetables and fruits mainly. You can use potato skins, you can use basically anything, banana peels, cantaloupe rinds, watermelon rinds, anything uneaten or that's been in the fridge too long and it's starting to get old, toss it in there, lettuce, whatever. Don't use meat or any kind of protein. Don't use anything cooked, and they don't like citrus. But other than that, just toss it in there. You can put eggshells in there. You can put coffee grounds in there. You don't want to put too much of any one thing. But they will turn it all into this rich, dark, soil-looking dirt. And vermicomposting creates a richer compost than regular bin composting. So a little bit goes a long way. You can mix it in with your bin composting. You can mix a little bit in with your soil just like it is. You just don't need nearly as much. You'll want to make sure, and when it's all composted, take the worms out. And you can put on rubber gloves if it bothers you. Then you dump the soil out. Start all over with a shredded newspaper, get it wet, put the worms back in. Be sure and look through the soil for babies and any stray worms and put them all back in and start over again. Then use that compost on your soil. And it works really, really well. I like to mix it with my bin compost because the bin compost isn't quite as strong, and I like to kind of cut the strength of it. Bin composting is just as easy, if not easier, than worm composting. Bin composting, you need a bin, which is open on the top and open on the bottom. A lot of people use chicken wire. I like to use pallets, wooden pallets, but it needs to be about 4x4, 4x5. You don't want it too tall because you've got to turn the compost. Like with a rake, you'll want to turn it, and if it's too tall, you can't really reach to the bottom. So use probably 4x4 is the best, 4x5. The compost pile itself needs to be about 3x3 for optimum heat. And that is how it is decomposing, is the warmth of it, the heat of it. When winter comes, if you want to toss a blanket over the top, you can. You don't have to. It will still be warm in the center. You'll layer it. You'll put in, on the very bottom layer, you want to put in sticks and cardboard and paper. And then the next layer are your leftovers from the kitchen. Same stuff we used before, no protein, and also no manure. People get mixed up about this. We don't put manure in our compost because manure can carry bacteria, it can carry parasites. We don't mess with manure. There are manure composts that you can buy, and they also don't smell bad. They have been processed properly and they smell fine, but we don't make manure compost just because there's too many things that could happen and go wrong. And protein out there also attracts rodents, and you don't want rodents in your compost. You know, you might have a raccoon, a squirrel, that's okay, but you don't want rats in your compost. So no protein, no manure. Then the third layer and final layer, you're going to want to put grass clippings. And limb clippings if you're trimming the bushes, but fine, not heavy-duty limb clippings. And that's your top layer. Then, as often as you would like to do it, you just go out and turn it. If it gets too dry, spray it with water. If it gets too wet, add more paper, more sticks, and just turn it periodically. Now, Rodell has written a book called Composting. It's Rodell's Book of Composting, and it is the Bible for bin composting. So they tell us exactly, precisely how to optimally compost, and they will tell you that you must turn it X amount of times in a week, and you must measure the temperature, and they have places you can buy these thermometers. It looks like almost like a compass on top with a metal stake that goes down into it, and it should be 140 degrees at all times, even in the dead of winter. And if that's what you like to do, please do that. You'll get really good compost in a really short period of time. Short meaning maybe 3 months. If you want to make it easy and you're just doing this for the fun of it and to have some compost for your soil, you don't have to turn it nearly as often. You don't have to measure the temperature. It's going to decay. That matter is organic, and it's going to decay if you never turn it. But I would suggest turning it at least once a month. And you will have a beautiful, wonderful compost. And whether it's vermicompost or whether it's regular outside bin compost, it shouldn't smell. It should smell like dirt that's just been rained on, and you know what a good smell that is. So I have no idea at all what Yvonne was using on her yard, but it wasn't real compost. Real compost doesn't smell, and it does wonderful, beautiful things for your yard. And I hope whether you buy it or whether you make it, you definitely want to use compost in your grass, in your gardens, your vegetable gardens, your flower gardens, everywhere. Compost, and then a little layer of mulch on top. Thanks for listening, and enjoy gardening.